Hey everyone, I'm Iman. Welcome back to our booking app series. Today we are diving into one of the most exciting parts of the UI, building the Add Hotel form. This form will let logged in users create new hotels by entering all the key details we'll need later for search and display. And yes, we are still in the front end phase, so no backend yet. But once the UI is complete, we'll move on to making this a fully functional booking app. Here's what our form will capture: hotel name, city, country, and a short description, price per night, and a star rating, hotel type, facilities VIA checkboxes, number of guests per room, and they can select up to 6 images per hotel. So as you can see, 6 files are selected, which will show up in here when we will set up Cloudinary and our backend. Right now we don't have any image URLs because we haven't set up Cloudinary yet, but once we are done with the front end of our booking app, we will do that. In the end, it will look like the finished example. So this is what it will look like, and if we hover one of them, as you can see, a delete button is here, and if we click on it, it will be deleted. Okay, once the user hits save, the hotel will be added to their My Hotels page, which we'll build in a future video. As you can see, here is our data, which is the proof that our form is submitted. If the user submits the form without filling any field, the form will throw error message. And yes, the form will be completely responsive. This is on smaller screens, on medium screens, on larger screens, and on extra larger screens. It might sound like a lot, but I'll walk you through each section clearly. We are focusing on the front end today, so no data saving yet. That will come when we tackle the back end. By the end of this video, you'll have a sleek, functional hotel form with all the right UI elements in place. So grab your editor, stay tuned, and let's build something awesome together. Let's jump into the code and bring this form to life. Our form is a separate page, so inside Pages folder, let's create a new file called addhotel.tsx. Create a component, and default export it. And inside the return statement, we will render a component called manage hotel form. Save it. Now let's import add hotel in app.jsx file. So before the catch-all route, we will have a separate route, path attribute, and /add-hotel will be the URL, and for this URL, we will render our add hotel component that we will nest inside layout component. Which is basically the header, search bar, and footer of our website that will be included in every route. By route means a single page of our website. Let's save it. Now let's create Manage Hotel Form component. Inside source folder, create a new folder called Forms. And inside, we will have different kinds of form in this folder. For now, we will have Manage Hotel Form. Let's create a folder called Manage Hotel Form, and inside, with the same file name, create a file called managehotelform.tsx. Let's create a component called Manage Hotel Form and default export it. Let's import it inside Add Hotel Form. We are getting this error because we haven't defined anything inside Manage Hotel Form. Let's save it, and back in Manage Hotel Form, inside return statement, we will have a form tag. We have put our Manage Hotel form in its own component. There's a reason for this. It's because it will make this form reusable. So whenever we come to make the Edit Hotel page, we can use the same form. Back in the example, as you can see, it's quite a large form. It has a lot of different sections, so it will be quite difficult to add everything in one component, as we may also lose track of the things. So to make our life easier, we will break our form into smaller components, and we are going to have a component per section. So we will have a hotel details section, type section, facilities section, guest section, and a section for the images. So this will help us organize our form into identifiable components, which will make it easier for us to go in and change later in the future if we have to do so. So with that in mind, the first thing we'll do is we will set up our form library, which is what we have been using so far in this series, called React Hook Form. So inside Manage Hotel Form, at the top of the file, let's create a type which describes the properties of our form. So in here we will say export type called hotel form data. Let's see what are the properties. So first we have name, which is a type of string, city string, country, which is also a type of string. We have description, which is type of string, price per night, it is camel case, which is a number, star rating, which is also a number. We have type, which is a type of string. Next we have facilities. Facilities, which will be an array of strings because user can select multiple facilities. And after we have adult count, which is type of number, and child count, which is also a type of number. And then we have image files, which is a type of file list because it will be multiple images, so it will be a list of images. And then we also have image URLs, which is an array of strings. And after this, well, I think we are done. Now inside Manage Hotel Form and before the return statement, create a variable called form methods. Let's import use form from React Hook Form. And before the parenthesis, we will have two angle braces, and inside we will define the type of our form which we had created above. In case you don't know, the useForm hook is a central feature of the React Hook form library designed to simplify form management and validation in React applications. Instead of destructuring methods like register, handle, submit, etc. from useForm, we are just assigning everything to form method variable. And the reason we are doing this is because we have broken up our form into smaller components. So we need to use what's called a form provider so our child components can get access to all the React Hook form methods. You will understand better when we will go forward. For now, we will wrap our form with the form provider. So opening form provider tag from React Hook form and closing, and we will wrap our form with it. If the autocomplete doesn't work, click at the end of the tag and click Ctrl+space and you will have autocomplete. And if that also didn't work, then just import it like this. Import form provider from React Hook form. We are having an error. Type is missing the watch, get values, get field state, set error, and 11 more. To resolve this, what we can do is on the form provider tag, add curly braces, spread operator, and form methods. So what we are doing is we are getting everything from useForm hook and assigning them to the form methods variable and spread them on the form provider. So whenever we create or render individual child sections inside this form, then we will able to use all these methods that we are getting from useForm hook. This pattern is called context-based form management using form provider. You may ask, why use form provider? When your form is split into multiple components like details section, type section, etc., you need a way to share form state and methods across all of them without prop drilling. Form provider solves this by creating a context that holds all the form methods, allowing child components to access those methods via a useForm context. We pass this into form provider so that any nested component can tap into them. Instead of passing form methods to each of them manually, you wrap the form in the form provider and use useForm context inside each section. This keeps our code clean, scalable, and easy to maintain. We assign a type like hotel form data to the useForm hook to enforce type safety, enable autocomplete, and catch field mismatches early. It keeps our form logic aligned with the expected data structure, making the development process smoother and less error prone. Now inside Manage Hotel Form folder, create a new file called, first of all we will create details section .tsx. Inside details section file, we will create a component called details section, which will be an arrow function, and inside return statement we will first have a parent div, and inside we will have a heading h1 which will say add hotel. Let's default export our component. Export default. Save it, and inside Manage Hotel Form and inside form tag we will import details section. Okay, save the file and let's open up our terminal. cd booking, go to the booking folder and run npm run dev. Control plus click on this link. Why isn't our website showing? Let's see if we have any error. Add hotel is not defined inside app.jsx. We haven't imported add hotel, so at the top of the file we will say import add hotel from /pages/add hotel. Let's save it and see. Okay, our error is gone. So this is our website. Let's go to /add hotel. So this is our heading. Why is this semicolon showing? So in here, let's remove it and save it. Okay, now let's create our form. So inside details section, after this h1, we will have a label and the label name will be name. And after this, we will have a input. Okay, input type will be text. First we will structure our details section and then we will style it. So inside curly braces, spread operator and register method, which we will destructure from use form context. So before the return statement, we will say const curly braces and we will destructure register method from use form context that we import from React hook form. So this is the context that we had defined in manage hotel form when we wrapped our form with the provider. Now in here we can access all the things that we need to make our form work. So after this, inside parentheses, name as the key and as the second argument. I will explain in a bit. Now after this label, we will have curly braces and inside we will handle our fields validation. So error that we destructure from use form context. So after this register we will say form state and from form state we will destructure errors. Okay, and in here we will say errors.name and parenthesis and div, and inside this div we will have errors.name.message. Okay, we are having an error. Let's hover. What this error means is that it doesn't understand the name field. So that's because whenever we import our app form context, it doesn't know about the types of our form. So to fix this, before the parentheses, we will have angle braces and we will use hotel form data type that we will import from parent manage hotel form. So this is the type that we had defined earlier. If we save it and the error is gone. Now let me explain it. We are telling React hook form to track the input field with the key name in the form state. Apply validation rules, in this case making it required. Bind the input to the form so it can collect its value and handle errors automatically. Now you may ask why the name key matters. The string name is the key used in the form's internal state object. For example, so when the form is submitted, React hook form knows to include the value of this input under the name field. The second argument adds a validation rule. If the input is empty, the form will prevent submission, show the error message if you have wired up error handling. If there is any error in the name field, only then show this error. So there is an error object in which we have error for the name field, and there is a message property inside that error, and we show its value in here, which is this error, hotel's name is required. This setup registers the input, validates it, and display an error if it's empty. Now let's style our elements and the input so that when we copy paste it, we don't have to style every field separately. So firstly, let's style our parent div, class name, flex. As you can see, this div child elements, so heading and label, will become in one line, but we don't need it in one line. So we will say flex call. So it will make the child elements in vertical order like this, and we will give a gap of 4 between them. Okay. For this heading, class name, font bold to make the text bold, text 3XL to make the text bigger by 3XL, and margin bottom of 2 to give the margin on the bottom of 2. Now by default we will have text 3XL, but on the larger screens and above, since the screens are bigger, we will say text 4XL. Let me show it to you. So by default it's 3XL, but when we go to the larger screens and above, the text is 4XL, as you can see. And after this we will say text center to make the text center in our screen. Now for this label, class name, text gray 700 to change the text color to gray by 700. If I click Ctrl plus space, as you can see there are many shades. So for our label we will select 700. We will say text base. So this is the font that we are giving to the label, and font bold to make the font bold. Flex 1. This determines how much a flex item will grow or shrink relative to other flex items. You can search it up or tell me if you want a separate video on this property in the comment section. So after this we have relative, which I will explain in a bit, and for this error we will have class name, text red 500 to make the error color red, MB2 to give some margin on the bottom, padding on top will be 2 and padding on left will be 3. You will understand it better when we will create the save button and try to save our form, and the error message will be showing. So basically we are giving some padding on the top and left. After this we will say absolute. Let me explain it. Relative on the parent. This sets the positioning context for any absolutely positioned children. It doesn't move the parent itself. It just tells Tailwind, hey, any absolute children should anchor to me. Absolute on the child. This is anchored to the nearest positioned ancestor, which is the div with the relative. So basically this error message will be relative to its parent. So if for example this is the input, so this error will be relative to its parent. So the error will show somewhere in here. Okay. The reason we had defined this error before this input is because we want this error inside this input, as you had seen in the intro. For this input, after the type property, class name, border, its color is really light and it's not bold enough. So what we can do is border dash 1 like this, and we will change its color to border gray 400. Let's save it. As you can see, now for the outline, so when we click on this input, as you can see the outline is black. To change this, what we can do is outline and the color that you want and its shade, which we will say 600. So if we hover on it, as you can see, rounded. To make the border rounded, width full, so that it can fill the whole screen width, padding 2 and font normal. Like this, and that should be it. Our form style is completed, and let's change its color also to blue. So for that we have a property called caret blue. Let's say maybe 600. Yeah, it's much better now, as you can see. Now, as you had seen in the example that the name will be in one line, but for the city and country it will be in the same line. So the city field will take up the half of the space and the country will take the other half. So how can we achieve that? We can achieve that by creating a parent div, and inside we will nest those two input fields. Let me show it to you. So after the label, we will have a div, and let's copy our label. This is the reason why we ready this first field, so that we can copy paste it again and again. So as you know, we have really big form, so it will make our work a bit easier. So copy and paste it 2 times. Okay. Now if we save it, as you can see, they are on separate lines. So what we can do is, on the parent div that contain these two input fields, we will say class name flex, so it will make them in one line, and also let's give gap between them, gap of 4, as you can see. So this is what flex1 does. So as we grow or shrink our browser, the fields will change accordingly, as you can see. Let's change the label to city and errors.city. Press Alt and click it so that you can change both of them at the same time. City, okay. And for this input, we will register this as the key city. And for the required message, we will say city is required. Let's do the same for the country. Let's save it, as you can see. Now outside this div that contains city and country, in here we will paste the label, and for this we will say description and instead of this input we will say text area. Okay, and change its closing tag. Oops, we had forgot the label closing tag. So let's save it. So here is our description. Let's change the register name to description, and in here description is required. Okay, and inside the text area what we can do is we will say rows. So how many rows this description field can hold. So we will say 10 and save it. Okay, as you can see, and make sure that your register key is same to the type description property. So after this we will have 2 more labels for price per night and star rating. So let's paste it, and for this let's change it to price per night, and also in here. Okay, and in here it will be type of number, okay? And after this we can say min 1. So the minimum number should be 1. If we save it and if we try to go below 1, as you can see, it's not going, so that user can't go below 1. So for example, in negative values, now after this we will change the required message to price per night. Now after this we will have star rating. Our star rating property will be a little different. Let's change its label to star rating. And for the class name, we don't need relative and also flex 1. Instead we will say maximum width of 50%. Max width 50% will exceed the width of the field to 50% of the screen. Let's save it. As you can see, since we only have one field in the line and we don't want it to take the full width of the screen. So let's do the same for price per night. For our price per night, we will only remove flex 1. So as I have told you earlier, we want the error messages inside this field, not on the top, not on the bottom, inside this, okay? But for the star rating and other fields, we will show the error message below these fields. So in here we will say max width 50%. And the star rating field will be a little different. So in here what we will do is, let's cut the error message and put it on the bottom of the input field, okay? Because we want this error message to be in the bottom. That is why we have removed relative from the parent, and let's also remove absolute from the child. So in here what we will do is remove this input and instead we will have select, okay? And closing tag, let's remove the type. Class name will remain same. We don't need it in here. Let's remove it. And inside the select tag, we will define a option in which we will say select a rating, and we will define a value attribute and we will leave it as an empty string, okay? And after this option we will have curly braces and inside an array, and in here we will have numbers from 1 to 5 for our star rating. And after this array we will use map method, and for each number we will display an option, and inside this option we will render the number, okay? So these numbers, and since we are using map method, we need to define a key to uniquely identify each option. So key will be number since our numbers are unique, and for the value we will have number, okay? So we haven't defined here any value because this is just a text. So if we save, as you can see, so this is just the text and we can select a rating from here, okay? If we haven't given option tag for the star rating, let me show you what I mean by that. Let's rename it. Let's give star rating as the key, and if we remove this option and save it, if we refresh our page, as you can see, if we haven't given option tag for star rating, one number will be selected. So even when the user hasn't selected any star rating, one number will be selected, as you can see. So even when the user hasn't selected any star rating, the error won't show because one number will be selected. So this is the reason we had given this option, and let's change it to star rating. Okay, save it. So that's it for our details section. As you can see, it's fully responsive. So that is it for our details section. Let's see if it's responsive. Now as you can see, our form is taking up the whole space, and if we go to the finish example, we need to give some padding on the x-axis, meaning on the left and right. So to do that, what we can do is, let's go to manage hotel form, and on this form tag, let's give some class names. So we will say flex. So flex will make our sections in horizontal order, but we need them in vertical order. So we can say flex goal. Okay, and then we will say gap 10 to give gap between each section. And for the padding, what we can do is, on larger screens and above, padding on x-axis will be 28. Since on smaller screens or medium screens we don't need it, so that is why we use here large breakpoint. So this will be applied to larger screens, extra largers, and so on. So if we save it, so this is what our form looks like now. Okay, now it's looking much better. So that's it for details section. Next we will build type section for our form. Let's close all these files, and inside manage hotel form folder, we will create a new file called typesection.tsx. In here, let's create type section component, const type section arrow function, return statement. Inside we will have a parent div and an h2 that says type. Let's default export it. Export default, and the name of the component, that is type section. Save it, and now we need to import this inside manage hotel form file. So after details section, we will say type section like this. Save it, and as you can see, here is our heading. Now if we look at the final example, these are the types that user can't put themselves when adding a hotel. Instead, we give them these types from where they can select what is the type of the hotel that they want to add. And we will store these types in a config file. So to do that, inside source folder, create a new folder called config. And inside, create a file called hotel options config.ts. Hotel options config.ts. And inside this file, create a variable called hotel types. That will be an array, and let's export it. And inside we will have these types. You can add your own types if you want to, or copy these types from video description. Anyway, at the end of our video, we will push the code to GitHub. So if you have some kind of typo, you can reference to that, and the link to that will be in the description box. And anytime you want to change the types, you can go to hotel options config.ts file and change them. That's why we put the types in separate file, and someone coming to change the code later will know that it is a config file. So back in our type section, now after the h2, we will create a new div, and inside curly braces, we will import hotel types from hotel options config, in which we had defined our types. and we will map each of them, and for each type we will show this label. Since we are using map method, we need to define a unique key. Let's say in here type, and inside this label create a input tag. Its type will be radio and its value will be type. And we also need to register this field. So spread operator register, the key will be type, and as the second argument we will define required message. That is, hotel type is required. We need to import register from useForm context. So before the return statement, const destructure register from useForm context that we import from React hook form, and we also need to give type in here, which will be hotel form data that we import from manage hotel form. If we hover on it, we are getting this error. Hotel form data is a type and must be imported using a type only import when this extension is enabled. You can either disable this extension or before destructuring hotel form data, we can say in here type, only type. So our error is gone. We have done the same in the details section, as you can see. Let's save it. Now we had added a radio button for each hotel type. Now we need to add some text which will be the label of the radio button. So to do that, after this input, create a span tag, and inside curly braces we will display the type. Let's save it. So our type is here, as you can see. Now we need to get a hold of selected type value. To do that, we will destructure watch from useForm context and then create a new variable called type watch, which will be equal to watch method. And inside, we want to watch the hotel type that the user selected. Watch is a function from React hook form that monitors the value of the type field. Type watch variable now holds the current value of that field. So anytime the watch property changes, we get the new value in this type watch variable. So let's save it. In here we are looping through an array called hotel types, and for each type we are rendering a label. Now let's also handle the validation. So in here we will destructure form state from which we will destructure error state. And before the last div, in here we will say error. If there is any error in the type field, only then we will show this div, and inside this div we will render error.type.message. It is errors, not error, as you can see. So let's save it. Now we will style our type section. So first of all, for this div we will leave as it is, and for this h2 we will say text 2xl to make the text larger by 2xl, and its color will be black, and its opacity will be 90. And if I click Ctrl plus space, and let's do 15 and save it, as you can see, the lower the number is, the less the opacity will be. So we will say in here 90, since we don't want it to be fully black, and margin on bottom will be 3 to give some margin on the bottom, and font bold to make the font bold like this. Now for this div, class name we will say grid and grid calls 2. So by default our types will be shown in 2 columns, and on the smaller screens and above we will say grid calls 3. If we save it and go a little upward, as you can see, now our types will be in 3 columns, and on medium screens grid calls 4. Let's go to medium screen, as you can see, and for the larger screen we will say grid calls 5. Save it. So on larger screens and above our types will be in 5 columns. Okay, now let's style our types, and we will apply styles conditionally. So what we will do is, inside this label we will say class name. Instead of strings we will have curly braces, and in here we will say type watch will be equal to type question mark. I will explain it in a bit. Cursor pointer, so that when we hover on it our cursor will turn into pointer. BG blue 300. Text center and text MD. Text center to make the text center, and text MD to make the text in medium size. Text gray 800. Rounded full to make the corners fully rounded, and padding on x-axis 4 and padding on y-axis 2, and font will be semi-bold. Okay, now let's copy it. We will have else ternary operator, and after ternary operator we will paste it, and in here only change the BG to 100 and also text to 700. Okay, let's save it. Now let me explain it. The class name is conditionally set based on whether the current form value matches the current item in the loop. This is the reason we had used method. So type watch equal to type checks. Is this hotel type the one currently selected in the form? If yes, apply the selected styles, and if no, apply the unselected styles. So when we select one of the types, its background and text color will be darker. Now we want to hide this radio button, so what we simply say is, inside this input we will say class name and set it to hidden, and save it. As you can see, now we need to give some gap in here. So if we go in this map div, we will set gap to 2 and save it. As you can see, so now user can select a type, and this section is also completely responsive, as you can see. Let's also style our error. Class name text red 500, so the text color will be red 500. Font bold to make the text bold. Text MD to make the text size medium, and padding on top will be 2. Save it. So while React hook form is applying validation, if there will be any error, it will be inside errors object, which will be inside form state. So that's where we are getting this error. So if there is any error for the type field, we will display its message. For now we will not see any error because we haven't submitted our form. So first let's build all of our section, and then we will save our form. So that's it for types section. Next we will build facilities section, from where user can select multiple facilities that the hotel provides. And for this section also we will store different facilities in the hotel options config.ts file. So let's close these files. So inside manage hotel form, create a new file called facilities section.tsx. Create a component called facilities section that will be an arrow function, and inside return statement we will have a div in which we will have h2 heading and inside a text called facilities. Let's export it. Export default facilities section. Save it and import it inside manage hotel form after the type section like this. So here is our heading. Now inside hotel options config.ts file, after this hotel types variable, create a new variable called hotel facilities, which will be an array, and inside we have our facilities. Again, you can either copy it from the video description or you can write your own facilities. Now after this heading, we will have a div and inside curly braces we will import hotel facilities dot map, and for each facility we will display its corresponding label. In here we will define the key because we are using map method. So facility is the key because our facilities are unique, so that's why we assign it to the key. And inside this label we will have an input tag, and this input's type will be checkbox, and for the class name we will say size 4 and its value will be facility like this, and after this input tag we will render the facility. Okay, now let's register this field. We will have curly braces register function. Let's import it from use form context. So before the return statement const destructure register, let's also destructure form state and its errors from use form context. Let's also define the type of this form, and before we will say type because this is the type that we are importing. Now let's register it. So it will be facilities, and for the second argument instead of required we will have validate. Okay, I will explain it in a bit. For each facility we will check inside curly braces we are getting some error. Let's see. Parameter facilities implicitly has any type. Let's see any quick fixes. Okay, it's saying you should explicitly type the facilities parameter as any or a more specific type such as a string of array to resolve the implicit any error. Let's see inside manage hotel form. Well, we had defined its type in here. I wonder what's wrong with it. Let's do that. Okay, so our error is gone. Let's also handle the error and then I will explain it. So after this second last div inside curly braces error.facilities and we will show this div. Oops, it's errors. And we will show errors.facilities.message. Let's save it. Okay, now let me explain it. It dynamically renders a list of checkboxes for hotel facilities and ensures that at least one checkbox is selected using form validation. Let me break it down. This loops through an array called hotel facilities. For each item, It returns a label containing a checkbox input. Each label wraps a checkbox. The key prop helps React efficiently updates the DOM when the list changes. This creates a checkbox for each facility. The value attribute is set to the name of the facilities. For example, Wi-Fi or pool. This is using React Hook Forms register function to connect the input to the form state. Facilities is the name of the field in the form state. The validation function ensures that the user selects at least one checkbox. This is the value passed to the validate function. It's expected to be an array of selected checkbox values, so the types that the user will select for their corresponding hotel. For example, Wi-Fi or pool. This checks if facilities is truthy, meaning it's not undefined, null or false. It prevents errors like trying to access .length on something that doesn't exist. This checks if the array has at least one item. If the user selected one or more checkboxes, this will be true. What it does. Together, this line ensures the facilities array exists. It contains at least one selected item. If both conditions are met, the validation passes. We will return true, otherwise it fails and returns an error message. It's like saying if you have made a selection and your list isn't empty, we are good to go. And the form won't submit unless at least one is checked. So if we save it, here are our facilities. Now let's style it. For this h2, class name text 2xl, text black, and its opacity will be 90. Font bold to make the text bold, and margin on bottom will be 5. Save it. And for this section we will use grid also. So grid, so it all will be in one line. By default grid calls will be 2, as you can see. On smaller screen grid calls 3. So let's see on smaller screens. Okay, as you can see, so this will be applied to smaller screens and above, and for larger screens we will say grid calls 4. So what I have said is that this grid calls 3 property will be applied to smaller screens and above. So this will be applied to smaller and medium, but for the larger screen breakpoint we had defined a separate property. So this larger breakpoint property will override this. So this property will be applied to larger screens and above. Unless for extra larger screens we will define an other calls property. So on larger screens we will have 4 columns. Same for extra larger screens. Let's give some gap between them. So in here let's go to our label. So in here we will say class name, we will say flex, gap 1 to give gap between checkbox and its text, and we will say text gray 700. Items center, to make the items center, as you can see our text is a little below corresponding to their checkbox. So now it's in the center, and after this we will say text MD and font semi-bold like this. For this checkbox we had defined size property, so we don't need any other in here. And for this error we will say class name text red 500, text size will be medium, font will be bold, and padding on top will be 2. Let's also give gap between the facilities. Gap will be 3 and save it. Let's try to select. As you can see we can select multiple facilities, and let's also check its responsiveness. Okay. So that's it for facilities section. Next we will build guest section. So for this section we have two fields, adults and children. User can write how many adults and children a hotel room can hold. So adults can't be less than 1 and it can't be greater than 10. For the children by default it's 0 and it can't be greater than 10. Okay, so this is what we will build now. Let's close these files. And inside manage hotel form folder, create a new file called guest section.tsx. In here, create a component called guests section and a heading in which we have guests as a heading, in which we have guests as text. Let's export it. Export default guests section. Save it and import it inside manage hotel form after the facilities section. Let's save it, and here is our heading. For the guest section, after this h2 we will have a div in which we will have a label called adults, and after this we will have its corresponding input. Okay, and for this input its type will be number, min 1 and max 10. So the minimum number user can select for adults is 1 and the maximum is 10. So the user cannot select a number greater than 10 and a negative value. So after this label we have another label for children. And after this text we will have an input, and in here also it will be a type of number, minimum should be 0 and maximum of 10. So the minimum number a user can select for children is 0 and the maximum is 10. So the user cannot select a number greater than 10 and in negative value. If we save it, so as you can see, for adults we can't go below 1 and for children we can't go below 0. And what we can do is, if we refresh the page, so after this what we will do is we will provide a default value of 0. So if we save it, as you can see, so 0 will be the default value. Okay, so our fields are here. Now let's register them. So after maximum attribute, inside curly braces, spread operator and register. Let's import register from use form context. So before the return statement, const destructure register, and let's also destructure form state from which we will destructure errors. Okay, from use form context from React hook form, and also let's define its type, which is hotel form data. Okay, and before this we need to define type like this. So our error is gone, parenthesis, and inside string we will assign a key called adult count for this field, and as the second argument we will say required and its message. This field is required. Okay, and let's also handle the error while we are at it. So after this input, inside curly braces, errors dot adult count dot message, we will check errors that we had destructure from form state has any error for the adult count field, and there is also question mark that will check if adult count exists or not, and if it exists then we will display its corresponding error message. And so we call them ternary operator, and inside a div we will render our error. Errors dot adult count, same, we will render a question mark to check if this field has any error, then we will display its message. Let's save it and let's do the same for children field. So after default values, curly braces, register, and we will pass child count as the key. For this field, we don't need to display any message because children are not required. Let's also handle the error message. So after this input, errors dot child count question mark dot message, and div errors dot child count question mark dot message. Okay, let's save it. Okay, now let's quickly style our guest section. So for the heading we have text to XL, text color will be black /90. The styles are similar to the other sections. Margin bottom of 5. Okay, and for this div, class name, and we will use grid so that it will be in vertical order, and grid calls 2. So it will be in one line and it will be the same on all the screen sizes. So next we will say border blue 500 rounded MD to make the corners rounded of our border, and background blue 100. Okay, let's give some padding of 3. Okay, padding on top will be 2 and padding on bottom will be 5. Okay, because in here we also need to show error messages. And let's give gap of 3 between our inputs like this, and on medium screens and above we will give padding on x-axis of 6. So on medium screens, since we have more space, so as you can see on x-axis we had given more space, and also on medium screens and above padding on top will be 3, and also padding on bottom will be 7 and gap will be 6. So as you can see, now let's style our label. Text gray 800, text MD to make the text medium in size, font semi-bold and flex 1. So this label and input will grow or shrink according to the other flex item. Okay, so both of our input will take equal space no matter the screen size. And for this input, after max attribute, we will say class name and we will say border 1 so that it will be a little bold. We will give its color border gray 400. And also let's give outline blue 600. So when we click on it, as you can see, we will say rounded to make the inputs corner rounded, width full so that it can take full space available to it. So that is why we give here flex 1 so that it will take half of the space. Padding on y-axis will be 2, so on top and bottom, and padding on x-axis will be 3, so on left and right. As you can see, if we give it 10, as you can see, so this is padding on x-axis. Let's change it to 3 and font normal. Okay. Let's also style our error message. It will be the same as others. Text red 500, text medium, font bold, and padding on top will be 2. Now let's style our children label. It is the same as the adult field. Text gray 800, and so it's the color of the text, and text size will be medium, font semi-bold, and flex 1. Okay, and for this input, after the default value attribute, border 1, border gray 400, so the color of the border, outline blue 600, rounded, width full, padding on y-axis 2 and padding on x-axis 3, and font normal. Okay, and for this error message, text red 500, text medium, font bold, and padding on top 2. Here is our guest section. We can select maximum of 10 adults and minimum of 1. For children, by default it's 0, and we can't go maximum than 10. Okay, and it's completely responsive, as you can see. So this is it for guest section. Next we will build images section. User can select up to 6 images, and right now we don't have any image URLs because we haven't set up Cloudinary yet and the functionality to delete an image URL. But once we are done with the front end of our booking app, we will do that. In the end, it will look like the finished example. So this is what it will look like, and if we hover one of them, as you can see, a delete button is here, and if we click on it, it will be deleted. Okay, now let's start building our images section. We will close this file and inside manage hotel form create a new file called images section.tsx. Create a component called images section and inside return statement we will have a div and a h2 that will say images. Let's export it. Export default images section and save it, and after the guest section let's import it. Images section like this. Here is our heading. Now after this h2 we will have a div inside curly braces in which we will have some logic, but before that before the return statement, what we will do is we will destructure register form state, from which we will destructure errors, and also watch method from use form context. And also let's define the type of our form like this. Okay. And now what we will do is, after this we will create a variable called existing image URLs, and we will use watch method and assign our field, which is image URLs. Okay. This line retrieves the current value of the image URLs field from the form state. It could be an array of URLs, a string, or whatever type defined in hotel form data. This way, as soon as the user adds or removes an image, the preview updates instantly, and we don't need to wait for the form submission. So we are doing this because we want to watch our image URLs field. So as I have explained before, watch is a function from React hook form that monitors the value of the field in our form. In our case, it will monitor image URLs field, and the existing image URLs variable now holds the current value of that field. So now anytime the watch property changes, we get the new value in this variable. Let me show you what I mean. So if we go in the finish example, so these are the existing image URLs, and we can select more of them. So for example, these ones. So the logic that we are trying to build is that, so if there is any existing image URLs, then we will display them in here. So that's what we are trying to build. Now back in our example. So in here we will check if there are any existing image URLs, and then we will show this div in which we will render our images. So inside this div we will say if there is existing image URLs that the user has selected before, and we will use map method, and for each URL in here we will also have the index of the image and arrow function, and in here we will render this div. Because we are using map method, we need to define a unique key which will be the index of the image array. That is why we had selected index here. So inside this div we will have an image tag like this, and we will define the source, which will be the URL, and after this image we will have a delete button. So we will say delete. Now after the existing image URL logic, we will have an input field, and its type will be file, and our input can select multiple images, and after this we will have accept attribute, and we will say image /star. We had defined multiple attribute so that user can select multiple image files, and what accept attribute does, it restricts the types of files a user can select when uploading, and tells the browser to only allow image files to be selected. After this we will register it. So register that we had destructured, we will register our field image files, and as the second argument we will have validate method in which we have image files and an arrow function curly braces, we are getting an error. It's not images, it's image files. We are getting an error. You need to ensure that your validate function returns a value. Okay, we haven't defined any value in here. So in here what we will do is create a variable called total length, and this will be equal to image files dot length plus inside parenthesis existing image URLs, and we will check if it exists and it has any length or it is 0. So what we are doing here is image files dot length. So these are the files that we will select. For example, let's select these 3 files. So these are the files that we had selected, okay? And these 3 are the existing images. So we will add the length of the files that we had selected and this existing image URL's length. So for example, image files dot length, these are these files that we had selected, and existing image URLs are these ones. So we will add them and we will first check if there is any existing image URLs and its length. So this is a safety measure. If any existing image URLs exists, we will add its length to this, or we will just select 0. It doesn't have any value. Okay, so we are adding both of them. So basically we are adding existing image URLs and the files that we had just selected and assigning its value to this total length variable. Why we are doing this? Because we will apply some conditions to it. So after this we will have an if statement and we will check if total length is equal to 0. So we haven't selected any image files and there isn't any existing image URLs. Okay, so we will check that, and if it's true, we will return a string called at least one image should be added. And the second condition is that if total length is greater than 6, we will return a message called total number of images cannot be more than 6. So we had selected 3 images. To show you, let me select 4 images. So there are 3 existing images and we had selected 6 more files. The images that we will select will be hosted on Cloudinary, and the URL of those images will be saved in the image URLs array. So the total length will be 7. If we try to save it, we will have an error message. Total number of images cannot be more than 6. Let's save it. So I had shown you this completed example because for now we will not see any of the images because we haven't set up Cloudinary yet. Okay, let's also handle our error validation. So after this second last div, inside curly braces we will say error dot image files, and if there is any error exist for image files field, we will show its error message. So inside a div errors dot image files dot message. Let's save it. It receives the current value of the image files input, likely an array of uploaded files. Inside this function, we are taking the length of selected files and adding it to the existing image URLs if they exist, which their length can also be 0, and we are assigning its sum to the total length variable. So for example, we had selected 4 new images to upload, and there are already 2 existing image URLs that we had selected before. So we will add them to the total length variable, And after this, still inside validate method, we have an if statement where we check if the total length of the files is 0, meaning if there is not any file in the total length variable, then we will return an error message called at least one image should be added. And if the total length of the files is greater than 6, then we will return an error message called total number of images cannot be more than 6. So if we save it and refresh our page, so here we have all of the 6 images. So right now I'm showing the completed example to you because we haven't set up Cloudinary yet and the logic to delete our images. We will do that once our front end is completed. So for now, let's style our image section. For this heading, class name, text 2XL, text. I had explained it many times, so now I think I don't need to explain it. Font bold and margin bottom of 5. Okay, and for this div, we will say border. Its color will be gray, 400, rounded to make its corner rounded, and padding of 4 on all sides, and on smaller screens and above we will have padding of 5. Flex and flex call and gap of 4. Okay, and for this div, grid calls to. So by default there will be 2 columns in which we have our images. On medium screens and above, grid calls 3. On larger screens, grid calls 4. And on extra larger screens and above, grid calls 6. We will also give gap between them, gap of 4. Let's save it. Now on this div that contains image and button, we will have class name called relative, and on the delete button we will have a class name absolute. Okay, so these two properties work together. Relative on the parent, this sets the positioning context for any absolutely positioned children. It doesn't move the parent itself. It just tells Tailwind, hey, any absolute children should anchor to me. Absolute on the child, this button is anchored to the nearest positioned ancestor, which is the div with relative class name. After this relative, we will have another property called group, which I will explain in a bit. And for this image, we will have class name, height of 52 and width full, object cover, so that it could cover the full space available to it. Object cover will make the image to fill the aspect ratio of its parent element. In our case, it is this div, and after this we will say minimum height full. It sets the minimum height of an element to 100% of its parent's height. It applies the CSS rule min height 100%. This means the element will never be shorter than its parent, but it can grow taller if its content requires it. Imagine you have a layout where a sidebar or a section should always stretch to fill the height of its container, even if there's not much content inside. Now on this button, inset 0, it makes the button stretch to fill the entire parent. So top, right, bottom and left all set to 0. So this is what our example will look like. On the parent div, we had set relative positioning. So parent div establishes a positioning context, and on the child we had defined absolute and inset 0. So child button will fill its parent. I hope you understand it. After this, we will say flex and items center. We can't use items center without flex property, so make sure that you define it. And also justify center. Justify center is used to center flex items along the main axis of a flex container. After this, we will say bg black to make the background black, and we will reduce its opacity by 50, and by default its opacity will be 0. And after that we will say group hover and opacity to 100. I will explain it, but first let's also add a little transition effect. So we will transition our opacity property and duration will be 300. Now let me explain the group property. Tailwind's group utility allows you to scope hover or focus styles from a parent to its children. Here's how it works in our example. This marks the parent div as a group container. It doesn't apply any visual styles itself. It just enables child elements to respond to its state. Like hover, this button starts off invisible, so opacity 0. When the parent.group is hovered, this child becomes fully visible. So we had set opacity 100. The transition is smooth when we add transition opacity and duration 300. In summary, the image is always visible. The button is absolutely positioned to cover the entire image. On hover of the parent div, the button fades in as an overlay with a semi-transparent black background and a centered delete text, as you can see in the finished example. If you want to animate other properties like scale or blur, you can combine group hover with those too. Okay, let's save it. Now let's style this input field. So after accept attribute, we will have class name width full. To make the width of the image full, text gray 700. So the text color will be gray 700 and font normal. Let's also style our error message. Class name text red 500. It's the color of our error. Its size will be medium and its font will be bold and padding on top will be 2. Save it. So that's it for our images section. Now let's create our save button. So back in manage hotel form, after the image section, we will create a span and inside create a button, and for the text we will say save. Let's define its type. Type submit, save it, and here is our button. Now let's style it. Class name flex, justify end so that it will be at the end of the screen like this. And for this button, class name font semi bold, text XL to make the text extra large, text white to make its color white, background blue 600, padding on x-axis 5 and padding on y-axis 2, border 2, and border color will be blue 700. Okay, rounded SM to make it a little bit rounded, and on hover opacity will be 90, so that when the user hover on the button, it will know that we have to click it. So this is for user experience. And when the button is disabled, BG gray, we will set its background to gray. Okay. Now that we have created our form, we need to submit it. So in here, after the form method variable, we will create a variable called onSubmit, handle submit function. The handle submit function, after it validates everything, will pass us the form data, which will be type of hotel form data. After this, we will have an arrow function. We will handle its functionality when we create the backend part. For now, we will just console our form data. So console.log form data, so that we can check if our form is being submitted. Now we will connect our form to our onSubmit function. So inside this form tag, after this class name, we will add onSubmit attribute and set it to the onSubmit function. Let's save it. We are having an error, cannot find name handle submit. We had forgotten to destructure handle submit method from form methods. So after form methods variable, we will destructure handle submit from form methods. Let's save it. So that's it for now. Now let's check our form and its responsiveness. So this is what it will look like by default. We can add a name, city, country, and a short description, price per night, and a star rating. The user can also select the type of the hotel and can add bunch of facilities, how many adults and children a room can hold. And they can also add up to 6 images. So this is what our form will look like by default. On smaller screens, on medium screens, on larger screens, and on extra larger screens. Now let's try to save our form. Here is our form data. We have name, city, country, description, star rating, adult count, child count, city, country, description, facilities. We had defined facilities in here. Seems like we have made some error. So if we go to the facilities section, this syntax is incorrect because we are using comma operator, which only returns the last expression, meaning the actual register call is being ignored, and we are passing just the validate object to the input, which doesn't bind the input to the form state. So let's remove it. We are getting an error. Let's cut it, Ctrl X, and inside the register function as the second argument, we will have a comma and we will pass our validate object. Now let's save it. Now let's check if we save our form. Let's select one of the facilities and save. So here we have all of our properties, and we also have our image files that we had selected, and we have everything else. Now let's also check our error validation. If we refresh our page and try to save, as you can see, we are having required errors. Why isn't this showing? Let's see. If we go to details section and price per night field, It's because in the register function, instead of name, we will enter price per night as the key. Let's save it. Refresh our page, and if we try to save it, so here is our required messages. As you can see, and in these fields, if we select 15 and 4 children, if we select negative value and try to save our form, value must be less than or equal to 10. So let's say 9 and save it. As you can see, children field is also getting an error. Value must be greater than or equal to 0. And if we say 26 for example, value must be less than or equal to 10. Okay, so these are our errors, and in here I want to show you a last thing, and that is if instead of this div we say in here span, and in here let me give a background, for example blue 800, and save it. As you can see, when we give span in here, it's positioned next to our price per night. And if we go back to div, as you can see, now it's in the center. So this is the reason why we have used div instead of span. Now let me remove it. Okay, so that's it for our form. So that's it for today's video. If you have any question, you can ask me in the comment section. If you like this video, click on the like button, comment, share and subscribe to UI Universe. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.